After failing the college entrance examination, I married Claude and spent 40 years working hard for him. But after his death, he didn't allow me to attend his funeral and split his estate in half, one half to our children and the other half to another woman. The only thing he left me was a single sentence, the admission letter that was taken away. I've paid for it with these 40 years. It turned out that I hadn't failed the exam back then. Instead, Claude had taken my admission letter and given it to Melisande to win her favor. I made a scene at the funeral, accusing him of the unfairness of these 40 years. But my children despised me. Dad and Meli Auntie were meant to be together. It's you who ruined their good thing by meddling. If you keep making trouble, don't blame us for abandoning you in the countryside to fend for yourself. I'm dead from anger, only to wake up again in the year of my college entrance exam. At that time, the admission letter was still on its way, and my life had just begun. Chapter 1. Winter. We're about to get married, and you're still making a scene? The familiar scolding voice reached my ears, and my previously confused mind suddenly cleared up. I had actually returned to 40 years ago. What was before my eyes was a rural scene in 20th century China. I hadn't yet married Claude, and he hadn't stolen my admission letter. Everything was still possible. Claude, who was standing in front of me, was still going on and on. It's just a bowl of meat. Are you going to die if you don't eat it? I've already told you. I only treat Melisande like a sister. Why do you have to think of us in such a disgusting way? If you keep making trouble, I don't think we need to get married at all. I held back my excitement and coldly said, then don't get married. This one simple sentence left Claude frozen in place. Winter, what are you saying? I said don't get married. I snatched the bowl of meat from Claude's hand and, holding back my anger, said, giving your fiancé's meat to another woman. What a coward! I don't need to marry you. Seeing me preparing to leave, Claude panicked and grabbed me. Winter, what do you mean? If you don't marry me, who are you going to marry? With your stupidity, do you think you can get into university like Melisande? I suggest you know your place, or when you beg me to marry you later, I won't even want you. Slap! I slapped Claude hard, staring at him with fire in my eyes and said, Claude, I'm telling you, Winter, don't want a man who is entangled with someone else. Before Claude could react, I quickly walked away with the bowl of meat. The pain in my palm reminded me at every moment this was real. I had truly been reborn. In my previous life, my grandfather, out of gratitude for the Ku family's grandfather saving his life, had made a deathbed wish that my parents promised to marry me to Claude if I failed the college entrance examination. I remembered my parents' hopeful faces as they watched me study day and night, only to receive the news that I had failed the exam. I was devastated and, in a haze, ended up marrying Claude. For 40 years, I took care of his sick mother, helped raise his siblings, and managed everything in the house. I thought all my efforts had been worth it, until Claude died and forbade me from attending his funeral, even leaving all his assets to his children and the woman he had been entangled with for half his life. He claimed that marrying me was just out of guilt for taking my admission letter. In his final days, he even said that he didn't owe me anything. I should have gone to university, had my own career, and lived a new life, but he ruined my life, made me work endlessly for 40 years, causing me to fall ill, and then said I had enjoyed a good life. Thinking about all this, I wanted nothing more than to crush every bone in Claude's body. Chapter 2. I rushed to the village's post station, asking if my admission letter had arrived. Old Wang, fanning himself, waved his hand and said, "Why is everyone asking me this? If the admission letter arrives, of course I'll let you know. Girl, just wait a bit." Everyone? I quickly sensed something was off and hurriedly asked, "Wang, when you say everyone, who else has asked?" Old Wang looked at me strangely before teasing. "Who else could it be? Just Claude and Melisande. Didn't Melisande take the exam with you? Claude's probably thinking about you. He said if you passed, he'd wait for you a few years. But if you didn't, he'd immediately give you a marriage certificate to make it official. Winter, look at how much he cares about you. He's a good guy. I unconsciously clenched my fingers. Claude sure knew how to put on a good show in front of others. Everyone thought he was deeply in love with me. So, naturally, no one in my previous life would have thought that Claude could steal my admission letter and give it to Melisande. I lowered my head, and my eyes immediately welled up. Wong, could I trouble you with something? From now on, if my things arrive, please don't let Claude take them. You don't know. Today he insisted on taking the meat my mother made for me and giving it to Melisande. He said she's weak and needs the meat to nourish her. He even said that I, being a country girl, couldn't eat delicate food, so it was a waste to give it to me. Wang slammed his fan on the table and stared at me angrily. What? What did Claude say? What's wrong with being from the countryside? Working people are the most honorable. Why should your meat be given to someone else? No way. I'm going to have a good talk with his mother. I quickly grabbed Wang's arm and feigned grievance. That won't be necessary. Ku's mother's health is already bad. What if she gets upset over this? Besides, if he's taking the things so openly, who knows how many things he's taken secretly? That's why I thought you could keep an eye out for me. From now on, if it's something addressed to me, don't give it to anyone else, no matter who they are. Just take this bowl of meat as a favor for helping me out. Wang wanted to refuse, but after I insisted, he reluctantly took it. With this worry resolved, I returned home with the empty bowl. As soon as I arrived, my parents looked at the empty bowl in surprise. Winter, did you finish it that quickly? I put the bowl down and shook my head. No, I gave it to old Wang. Before my mother could speak, a voice full of anger came through. Winter? What do you think you're doing? Why did you give the meat to someone else? I turned around and responded dismissively. What? Do I need your permission to use my things? My mother grabbed my hand and asked. Winter, Claude is right. That meat was for you to share with Claude, wasn't it? How? I silently clenched my fist and then gave a mocking smile. Claude, why didn't you tell the whole story? You wanted my meat, but it was for Melisande, wasn't it? You keep saying we country people are a waste, but the meat should go to Melisande to nourish her. Why should we give our things to you just to show off to her? Claude panicked and immediately retorted. Are you crazy? Anyone who says such things deserves to be struck by lightning. I immediately seized the opportunity and stepped forward. Oh, you have so much to say in front of me, but you can't say a word in front of the elders? Claude, it's true your grandfather saved my grandfather's life, but over the years, our family has helped yours plenty. Money when you needed it, food when you were hungry. My dad even lost a hand trying to save your dad. The debt is repaid, don't you think? Now, are you planning to blame us for the next 18 generations of your family? Chapter 3. When these words left my mouth, my parents' expressions instantly darkened. Originally, this marriage had been forced on them by Grandpa's dying wish. They both knew very well that Grandpa had used me to pressure them into continuing to support the Ku family. Although Claude seemed like a good man, it was only after Grandpa's deathbed plea that they had reluctantly agreed. However, if it meant I would suffer and be mistreated, they would never have agreed. Seeing my parents' gloomy faces, Claude hurriedly said, Winter, what nonsense are you talking about? Melisande and I are innocent. Stop being so smug. As long as you fail the exam, you'll have to marry me. With that, he stormed off in a huff. After Claude's curse, my father's face naturally wasn't much better. Winter, if you really don't want to marry, I'll protect you with my life. My mother held me, her eyes full of tears. My good daughter, why must they treat you like this? I felt the warmth of my mother's embrace, and my heart was filled with an indescribable sorrow. Although they said this, the village had always valued filial piety above all else. Grandpa was gone, but Grandma was still around. Grandma always upheld Grandpa's words, and if I really refused to marry, she wouldn't hesitate to force me with her death. At that point, the villagers would gossip mercilessly, and my parents would face criticism until they couldn't bear it anymore. How could I bear to do that? I wiped away my tears and comforted them. It's all right, Mom, Dad. As long as I get into university, the village will have nothing to say. My mother was momentarily stunned before she realized what I meant. So, you sent the meat to Wang to prevent Claude from making a move? But such a big thing. It might seem big, but it's not impossible. Dad stood up and ruffled my hair. Winter, leave this matter to me. I believe you'll get into university, and I won't let anyone take what's yours. I nodded heavily in agreement. For the next few days, my parents took turns going to the post station, making sure no one could steal my things while they kept watch for any signs of Claude. Meanwhile, things weren't going well for Claude and Melisande. Melisande had been sent to the countryside as an educated youth, and it was there that she had gotten involved with Claude. Claude, being a man, couldn't help with the heavy labor, so he always made me do it. In the past, I believed his words and thought he wanted Melisande to teach his younger siblings, so I worked hard without complaint. But now that I was awake, I would no longer do those tasks. Without me to do the heavy lifting, Melisande quickly grew tired and complained about being exhausted. Eventually, Claude had to step in to help. Rumors began to spread, and Claude claimed he was just visiting home and would soon return to his unit. After much consideration, he finally came to find me. Winter, I know I said some things I shouldn't have, but there's really nothing between me and Melisande. She's leaving soon to attend university. Tell me, what could we possibly have? I really just needed her to help teach Tom and Lily. You'll be their sister-in-law in the future. Can't you just give me a break? I impatiently pushed him away, each word sharp and clear. Stop trying to get close to me. I'd rather marry a pig or a dog than marry you. Claude, pushed away by me, became furious. Winter, you're such a crude woman. How could someone like you ever get into university? Just wait. I couldn't be bothered to deal with him anymore, and I hurried off in the opposite direction. When I arrived at the familiar spot under the tree, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I was just in time. In my previous life, I had been working here when I happened to save an unconscious middle-aged man. At the time, I thought it was just a small favor, and after he asked for my name, I gave it to him without thinking. I never paid attention after that. Little did I know, that man's name was Jack, and he held a high position in the military. After Claude learned that I had saved Jack, he used the favor to help himself rise through the ranks, eventually reaching a high position. But in my past life, he repeatedly humiliated me, calling me useless, while boasting about the powerful backgrounds of other people's wives. He conveniently covered up the favor Jack had done for him. This time, I would make sure that Claude wouldn't benefit from Jack's favor. Chapter 4. As soon as I thought of this, I quickly used some first aid techniques on him, just as I had done in my previous life. Before long, the man slowly regained consciousness. Little girl, thank you for saving me. May I ask your name? I was momentarily stunned, then smiled and said, Winter, it was just a small favor. I still need to go to work, so I'll be leaving now. Before Jack could ask anything more, I waved my hand and quickly walked away. I had no intention of using Jack for anything. I had heard of his reputation as a strong and upright soldier. Someone like him shouldn't die here, and I only hoped that Claude wouldn't be able to use the favor to manipulate him in the future. With this matter settled, I felt much lighter. In the following days, Claude behaved unusually well, and even Melisande no longer came to flaunt Claude's affection for her. But as the days passed, the admission notice still hadn't arrived. Finally, Wang, seeing me ask for the notice again, couldn't help but speak up. Winter, this might mean you didn't get in. I naturally knew that wasn't the case, so I quickly asked again. Wang, do you know if Melisande has been accepted? Wang shook his head and replied, I haven't heard anything, but someone did see her packing up. They say although she didn't get in, someone came to take her back home. Hearing this, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. In my previous life, Claude had insisted on taking my admission notice and giving it to Melisande because her family wouldn't help her return to the city unless she got into university herself. Could it be that things hadn't changed? Suddenly, an idea struck me, and I quickly asked, Wang, did the postman just leave? Wang nodded, and without another word, I rushed toward the village entrance. At the village gate, I managed to stop the postman who was about to leave. Hello. I wanted to ask if there's any mail for Winter. The postman thought for a moment before responding. Wasn't it already picked up? They said it was for Winter's lover. I even asked the villagers, and they said it was him. In an instant, a rush of blood surged to my head. I felt as though I couldn't breathe. All the memories from my previous life pressed on my chest, and the anger boiled over. I quickly started running toward the Ku family's house. On the way, I passed by many villagers, but I couldn't even spare them a glance. I rushed into the Ku family's house and immediately spotted Claude, looking all cozy with Melisande. Without thinking, I slapped Claude hard across the face. Claude, where is my admission notice? Claude's face turned bright red from the slap, and the villagers who had followed me stared in shock. Winter, what are you talking about? When he saw so many people had gathered, Claude forced himself to stay calm and shouted, "What admission notice? You must have lost your mind after failing the exam." Seeing Claude's shameless face, I couldn't hold back my anger and shouted, "You're the one who's lost your mind." I wondered why Wong couldn't get the notice. "You must have taken it from the postman, and then you told everyone you're my lover? Bah, you haven't even married me and you call yourself my lover. How shameless!" At these words, the crowd immediately started murmuring. Come to think of it, Claude did take a piece of mail meant for Winter. But didn't he say it was for Winter? Could it be that he didn't actually give it to her? As the crowd began to question, Melisande quickly brought out an envelope and said, "It's this one. It's just that I was too busy and forgot to give it to her." I snatched the envelope and opened it, only to find a blank piece of paper inside. Claude immediately realized what had happened and sneered. "You think I didn't give it to you? What's so special about a blank piece of paper? You must have switched the contents." I clenched the blank sheet of paper, glaring at Claude. At that moment, Tom and Lily rushed over, pushing me aside. "Stop talking nonsense. It's just a blank sheet of paper. Do you have any evidence that my brother took your admission notice?" The villagers, seeing this, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Tom and Lily are the most honest kids. Winter, this must be a misunderstanding." Even my parents, who had arrived by this time, were uncertain and tried to persuade me to leave. Claude, seeing this, became even more smug. He taunted, "Winter, what's the matter? You hate me so much that you won't marry me? You want to leave and become a phoenix, don't you? But a sparrow is still a sparrow, no matter how much it wishes to become a phoenix. I advise you to just wait patiently for me to submit the marriage application. We'll get married, and that'll be that. Looks like the one who should confess is you." A stern voice suddenly rang out from behind, drawing everyone's attention. The crowd turned to look, and saw a middle-aged man with an air of authority walking toward us. "Little girl, we meet again." Chapter 5. I stood there, stunned, staring at Jack. I hadn't expected him to show up at this moment. Claude seemed to think he had found the perfect opportunity, immediately shouting out, "Aw, so that's it, Winter. I was wondering why you suddenly didn't want to marry me. So you've found someone else. This man could be your father. How shameless of you." The villagers began to gossip amongst themselves. "Who is this man? That's right. Why did Winter suddenly refuse to marry? Could she really have fallen for this old man? I never would have guessed. She always seemed so obedient." I couldn't take it anymore. I was about to slap Claude again when he grabbed my wrist. Did I hit a nerve? "Winter, don't forget. It was my grandfather who saved your grandfather. This engagement has already been arranged. You can't back out now." "What admission notice? You must be dreaming. If you have the guts, let this old man get you another admission notice." Before Claude could continue, another voice rang out. "Shut up, Claude. Do you even know who you're talking to?" When I saw who had spoken, Claude's face immediately drained of color. "Commander, what are you doing here?" The commander, looking disappointed and angry, spoke sternly. "Why am I here? Perhaps you should ask what you've done. This is Major Song. This young lady saved Major Song's life. Major Song came specifically to thank her. And here you are, as soon as he arrives, slandering her. You've really brought disgrace to our entire unit." Claude's face turned pale, and he started to shrink under Jack's gaze. "Major Song, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you. Before Claude could finish, Jack waved him off coldly, not giving him a chance to explain. He turned to me and asked gently, "Little girl, are you sure it was him who took your admission notice?" I nodded, certain of my words. Yes, it was him, considering the close, ambiguous relationship between him and Melisande these past few days. I reasonably suspect the notice was given to her. Upon hearing this, Melisande panicked. "Winter, what are you talking about? My admission notice was earned by my own merit. How could it be yours? Are you trying to use Major Song's presence to forcibly take it from me?" "Melisande," Claude immediately scolded her. "Stop spouting nonsense. Major Song is not that kind of person." He turned to me, his eyes filled with desperation. "Winter, Melisande didn't lie to you. The admission notice really is hers. I know you don't want to marry me, but you can't deceive everyone like this." "Claude, stop slandering me." I remained unmoved and coldly retorted, "If it's not mine, then let her show the admission notice and match the name on it, right? Or are you too guilty to dare?" The villagers began to murmur, nodding in agreement. "That's right. Just match the name and we'll know who it belongs to, right? Besides, I heard from Wong that the coup boy often sneaks Winter's things to flatter Melisande. Flattering her is one thing, but blocking the postman to steal someone's admission notice? That's a whole different matter. I'm sure there's something shady going on here." At first, the villagers thought I was just heartbroken over my failure and losing my mind, but seeing Claude and Melisande acting so suspiciously, they all started to doubt them. The commander urged, "Claude, this young lady is right. Just show the notice and match the name. It'll be clear, won't it?" With everyone pressing for answers, Melisande stubbornly crossed her arms and declared, "The admission notice is not with me." I darkened my expression and immediately asked, "What do you mean? How could it not be with you?" Melisande rolled her eyes and replied, "This isn't my house. Why should I keep my admission notice here? It was sent to my home address. My parents sent me the letter to let me know I got in." "What? Are you going to make me take you to my house to prove it? If you don't believe me, you can search my house. See if you can find the admission notice." Chapter 6. Seeing the smug expressions on Claude and Melisande's faces, I immediately understood they had clearly planned this all along. After all, Commander Song was a military man. How could he search a woman's house without any solid evidence? Even if they did search, they must have hidden everything long ago. Song's expression darkened after a long silence. "Claude, do you really think that whether someone passes the exam or not can only be determined by an admission notice?" I was momentarily stunned, then couldn't help but feel a sense of relief as I turned to Commander Song and eagerly asked, "Commander Song, do you have a solution?" Commander Song turned slightly, revealing someone who had been standing behind him. "Principal Zhao." I looked at Principal Zhao in surprise, unsure of what to say. "Didn't you go back to the city? Why are you here now?" Principal Zhao affectionately patted my head and smiled helplessly. "I was planning to head back, but when Commander Song came to me asking about your situation, I decided to come along." After saying that, Principal Zhao's expression grew stern as he turned to Melisande. "Melisande, do I need to explain this further? The one who passed the exam is Winter, not you. The school has the records. Do you really intend to use Winter's name to attend university?" Upon hearing this, Claude's face turned pale. He never expected that I would have just saved Commander Song, and that I'd end up witnessing this scene. Even their lies were being exposed by the witnesses brought along by Commander Song. Melisande's face was now full of panic. No longer displaying the arrogance she had earlier, she nervously grabbed Principal Zhao's hand, trembling as she said, "Principal, the admission notice is mine. If it's not mine, I won't be able to go back. I don't want to stay in this countryside. Please, give me this opportunity." Principal Zhao pulled Melisande's hand away, his voice cold. "That's no reason to steal Winter's admission notice. Return it now." Commander Song turned to Claude with a stern expression. "The facts are clear. Claude, are you still going to cover for her?" Upon hearing this, Claude became desperate. He had performed well in the military, and it was because of this that the commander had taken an interest in him. He couldn't afford to ruin his future for Melisande. "Melisande, The admission notice. Give it back to Winter. We'll just retake the exam next year. Claude looked at Melisande with urgency, trying to get her to hand over the notice. Melisande, however, pushed him away in disbelief. Claude, it's easy for you to talk. Do you have any money? After you've fallen out with Winter, how are you going to get the money to send me to school? We'll figure out the money. Don't worry. Claude was now frantic, his gaze turning threatening. Do you really want to make a scene now? Melisande, who had been spoiled by Claude, immediately reacted angrily to the threat. In a fit of rage, she ripped the admission notice out from her clothes. Before I could rush up to grab it, Melisande tore the notice to pieces. The scraps fluttered to the ground, and I couldn't hold myself back from slapping her across the face. Melisande, have you lost your mind? No one had expected Melisande to hide the admission notice on her person. In this era, when one's reputation was everything, who would dare to search her body? Melisande clutched the side of her face where I had slapped her, her eyes filled with deep hatred. I'm crazy, right? I won't let anyone have something I can't have. Winter, dream on if you think you'll go to university. As I looked at the admission notice fragments scattered across the ground, my heart ached so much it felt as though it were bleeding. My mother came over, gently supporting me as she did. I was about to bend down to pick up the pieces when Principal Zhao suddenly grabbed my arm. Winter, don't rush. Commander Song has already taken care of everything. I looked up at Commander Song in confusion, and he nodded at me with a smile. When I first found out you hadn't received the admission notice, I had someone contact Huaqing University to send you a new one. I specifically instructed them to make sure it was delivered into your hands personally. This university is yours to attend. After all, you earned it. I felt a sudden warmth in my eyes and immediately bowed deeply to Commander Song. Commander Song, thank you. My parents, overwhelmed with emotion, also expressed their gratitude to Commander Song and the others. The villagers around us sighed in relief and began to congratulate me. Chapter 7. How wonderful. Winter is going to university. Our village finally has a college student. Exactly. Who said our village can't produce a golden phoenix? Winter is the golden phoenix. In contrast to the cheerful atmosphere, the faces of Claude, Melisande, and their group were as grim as could be. After all the trouble, not only had they failed to take my university spot, but they had also ruined their own future and reputation. The others tactfully ignored them, and my parents, in high spirits, insisted on inviting Commander Song and his group to our home for a meal. Unable to resist my parents' kind invitation, Commander Song and his colleagues agreed. The group quickly left, leaving Claude and the others behind with dark faces. At home, my parents had bought meat and brought out a treasured bottle of wine, insisting that Commander Song and the others have a few drinks with them. After the meal, my dad looked at me and said, "My daughter finally made it through." Commander Song, you don't know, she's been saying since she was little that she wanted to do something big, to contribute to the country. Normally, I'd just keep supporting her with the exams, year after year, but that engagement, it's what ruined her chance this time. As he spoke, my dad wiped away a tear. I looked at him helplessly and comforted him. Dad, what's the point of saying all this? Anyway, I've passed, and I won't have to marry Claude. Good days are ahead. Commander Song patted my dad's shoulder and looked at me with admiration. Winter is right. Success comes after hardship. Winter will surely do even greater things in the future. I happen to know a few people at Huaqing University. I'll ask them to look out for you. Don't worry. With Commander Song's words, my parents finally relaxed. After the meal, Commander Song gave me his phone number, telling me to reach out if I ever needed anything. After bidding farewell to Commander Song and the others, my parents, full of joy, began preparing everything I would need for university. Claude, unwilling to let me go to university, shamelessly came to find me again. Winter, let's get married after you finish university. After getting my admission notice, my last bit of patience for Claude completely vanished. Claude, how can you be so shameless? We agreed that if I passed the university entrance exam, the marriage would be off. You said I was stupid, that I couldn't get in, and you looked down on marrying me, didn't you? I'll tell you now. It's not me who needs you. After scolding Claude, I refused to speak to him any further. He went to my grandmother, trying to use Grandpa's last words to force her to intervene and make me marry him. But when my grandmother heard about what Claude had done, she grabbed a broom and kicked him out. You little brat. You stole my granddaughter's admission notice, and you still have the face to talk about marriage. Get out! After all this, the Koo family's reputation in the village was thoroughly ruined. Whenever any of them went outside, people couldn't help but gossip and point fingers. Koo's mother, who had already been in poor health, became even more ill due to the stress. Tom and Lily, who used to be favored for their cuteness and cleverness, now found the villagers treating them coldly. The local children, who had once believed their lies without question, now called them the little liars. The children, young as they were, couldn't handle the name-calling, and their resentment toward Claude and Melisande grew. Before, the Koo family had been helped by my family, and Claude's monthly allowances left him with a little extra for Melisande. But now, with things like this happening, my parents were no longer willing to help. Koo's mother's medical expenses, Tom and Lily's clothing and school fees, all of it fell solely on Claude's shoulders. He wanted Melisande to take out some money for emergencies, but Melisande refused, and they fought several times, almost to the point of involving the village chief. This was all information my mom shared with me. She was furious about what the Koo family had done, and the worse things got for them, the happier she felt. I hugged my mom, trying to calm her down. Whatever happens to them doesn't concern us anymore. Good days are ahead. I thought everything was over, but some people weren't ready to let things go. That day, just as I was about to head home after finishing my work, I suddenly felt dizzy, my steps unsteady. At the same time, a strange heat spread throughout my body. I instinctively leaned against a tree for support, but when I looked up, I saw Claude standing in front of me. It's you? I immediately realized what had happened. He had drugged me. Claude, you're despicable, using such underhanded tactics. Claude looked at me with fury in his eyes. He hissed through clenched teeth. Winter, if anyone's to blame, it's you for being so stubborn. Why couldn't you just marry me? Why did you have to go to that university and make me lose face in front of Commander Song? Do you know? I could have gotten a promotion this time. I forced myself to stand up, gasping for breath as I said, Claude, don't think I don't know what you're planning. Chapter 8. Isn't it just because you want my parents to keep helping your broken family because of me? Tell me honestly, how much of your monthly allowance have you given to your own family? Claude sneered, mocking me. So what? Blame your grandfather for saying that if you passed the university exam, you wouldn't have to marry me. Why should it be that way? This is what your family owes us. Don't say your dad is handling the marriage. Your whole family should be grateful to us. We could have had a peaceful marriage, but it was you who forced me to do this. I turned to run, but in the next moment, Melisande suddenly appeared and shoved me to the ground. Why waste time talking to her? Do it quickly! When I saw Melisande, my eyes widened in disbelief. Melisande, why are you helping Claude? You've ruined me. And now how could I ever let you have an easy time? Melisande looked at me coldly. Winter, just stay here and marry him. I grabbed at the grass on the ground, glaring at Claude. Do you dare? If you do this, I'll tell Commander Song, and you'll never be able to stay in the army. Melisande bent down and slapped my face, sneering. Winter, do you think we haven't thought of everything? Claude is also drugged. We'll just say it was a little accident. Somehow the medicine got spilled in the water, and you drank it by mistake. It's all just an accident. Who's going to believe you? As for you, being seen with a man in public, whether you wanted it or not, if you don't marry him, just wait to be publicly shamed. It felt like flames were burning through every drop of blood in my body, my entire being boiling with heat. With gritted teeth, I bit my lips, using the pain to keep myself sane. Claude's eyes were already hazy, filled with raw lust that was impossible to hide. Melisande crouched on the ground, gleefully watching me. Winter, don't think anyone is coming to save you. I've already sent everyone away, and even if you bite your lips or scream until your voice gives out, no one is going to save you. Winter, you'll stay here for the rest of your life. This is your fate. Melisande's mad laughter echoed in my ears, and I was suddenly reminded of how she laughed the same way at Claude's funeral in my previous life. She was the same age as me, yet she looked 20 years younger. Her elegant demeanor was a stark contrast to the frenzied version of myself back then. I clearly remembered how she had walked up to me, smirking, and taunting me. "Winter, what if you stay married to Claude for 40 years? He only married you to have a maid, someone to take care of his parents, raise his siblings, and manage the household. He said, I'm nothing like you. You were born to serve, while I was born to be pampered. Come to think of it, I should thank you for letting me enjoy so many years of luxury with Kuji." I was trembling with anger, and I raised my hand to slap her. But my children pushed me to the ground. "Dad and Aunt Lynn are the perfect match. Mom, how can you look at yourself? I'd be embarrassed to call you my mom. Dad's funeral, Dad's inheritance, whatever he wants to do with it is his business. What does it have to do with you? Someone who hasn't done anything? Dad was right back then. He spoiled you too much and let you get away with everything." They stood with the people who ruined my life, and each word they spoke pierced the most tender part of my heart. I was so furious that it felt like I was being killed by my own emotions. Before I died, I could still hear them cursing my death. Now that I had a second chance, how could I be willing to let the same ending play out again? I turned my head to look at Claude, who was already half conscious and stumbling toward me. My gaze falling on the stone next to Melisande, a strange surge of strength filled my body, and just as Claude was about to grab me, I picked up the stone and threw it at Melisande's head. Melisande collapsed to the ground, and I used this opportunity to push myself up. Claude immediately pounced on her, tearing at her clothes. Melisande was dazed for a moment from the blow, and as she regained her senses, she desperately covered herself. "Claude, look carefully. I'm not Winter. Let go of me." At first, she tried to rouse Claude's sanity, but they had taken too much of the drug for their act to work. Claude had already lost control. Having spent years in the military, he had the strength to easily overpower Melisande. Melisande finally panicked, crying out for Claude to let her go, even begging me, "Winter, save me. I was wrong. Please, please save me." I threw the stone I had used to strike her to the ground, and Melisande's face lit up with hope. She quickly crawled toward the stone, eager to use it to knock Claude out, just like I did. But just as her fingers were about to touch the stone, Claude yanked her back, tearing off her clothes. I turned around and ignored the sounds of her cries and curses, walking away step by step, headed toward a new future. Chapter 9. Avoiding the crowd. I returned home and immediately submerged myself in the water tank. In the final moments before losing consciousness, I saw my mother drop the farming tools in her hands and rush toward me anxiously. "Don't tell anyone." After leaving these words behind, I lost all awareness. When I regained consciousness, I was met with the concerned faces of my parents. "Winter, it's good that you're awake. Good that you're awake." My mother, who had been terrified, finally sighed in relief. I struggled to force a smile, feeling guilty. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry for worrying you." My mother shook her head, gently stroking my hair. Was it Claude and Melisande again? Before I could even ask, my father spoke up from the side. "Claude and Melisande were caught having an affair in the small grove. I heard they couldn't even break apart. That area, if I'm not mistaken, is where you usually work, right?" I nodded and told them everything that had happened. After hearing my story, my mother pulled me into her arms, speaking with heartache. "Those two brutes. Why won't they leave Winter alone?" My father looked at me with concern. "Winter, they're probably going to try to pin this on you. Why don't you go stay with your grandmother for a while? Your mother and I can handle the work here." I shook my head and spoke softly. "I can't run away from this. If I leave, it'll only make the situation worse." Just as I finished speaking, there was a sudden burst of noise from outside the house. "Winter, get out here." I quickly dressed and stood with my parents by the door. I saw Ku's mother, along with Claude and Melisande, blocking the way, surrounded by a crowd of villagers eager to watch the drama unfold. "Winter, you little slut." Seeing me, Ku's mother immediately shouted, her face twisted in anger. "How dare you scheme against my son?" My mother, already furious, stepped forward and grabbed Ku's mother by the hair, slapping her twice. "You filthy woman. Who are you calling dirty? What's it got to do with my daughter if your son messed up? Say that again, and I'll tear your mouth apart." Claude tried to intervene, but my father blocked him. Ku's mother was frail, and Claude, already drugged, was no match for my parents in a fight. The villagers quickly stepped forward to separate them, trying to calm things down. "Why don't you just talk this out? What's the point of causing such a scene?" Claude glared at me with hatred, then spoke. "Winter, you actually dared to drug me and Melisande. Where's your proof?" I looked at him with composure, sneering. "Chan, tell them if it was Winter who asked you to bring us the water." Claude pushed Chan, the child from Lee's family, to the front and pointed at me, demanding an answer. Chan cautiously glanced at me before nodding. "It was her. She asked me to give Kuji and Melisande the water." This statement caused an immediate stir, as the villagers stared at me with confused and scornful looks. I let out a mocking laugh. "Chan, you say I asked you to drug them. Then tell me, where did I give you anything to make you agree?" Chan, stiffening his neck, quickly responded. "On the little dirt slope behind the mountain. You gave me a piece of candy, saying it was just to quench Kuji and Melisande's thirst. I didn't know there was something harmful inside." I stared at Chan and continued pressing. "What kind of candy was it? Show me." Claude anxiously interjected. "The candy's already been eaten." "Winter, do you still want to deny it?" I grabbed Chan's shoulder and suddenly lowered my face, speaking in a stern tone. "Chan, you definitely kept the candy wrapper, right? You mentioned the place, but you didn't say the time. Was it last night at dinner, or the day before at lunch? Remember, the lying child will be eaten by monsters." I made a scary face, and Chan immediately began to cry, throwing the candy wrapper at me in panic. "It's this one." Chapter 10. Yes, it was yesterday at dinner. I released the crying Chan and picked up the candy wrapper from the ground. "This candy, I remember, was brought back by you, Claude, wasn't it?" At the time, Tom and Lily were still boasting in the village, saying they only gave it to Melisande and them. Nobody else got any. Furthermore, during dinner yesterday, I was helping someone move things. "Claude, are you really going to blame your filthy actions on me?" Chan's mother saw the situation was going south and immediately questioned him angrily. "Chan, tell the truth. Who made you drug it?" Chan, trembling with fear, spoke in a small voice. "It was Kuji. He asked me to give it to Winterjijia, but I really didn't know there was something harmful in the water. Kuji said I was helping him, and Chan mama said if I didn't help, she'd send me to the police." At this point, the truth was laid bare. Chan's mother immediately turned on Claude and Melisande. "You shameless people, you harm others and still dare to drag our Chan into this. Do you really think I've become a soft touch now?" Ku's mother tried to intervene, but Chan's mother grabbed her and slapped her across the face. In the end, the Ku family lost all their face. Melisande's reputation was ruined, and she had no choice but to marry Claude. I heard that Melisande's parents originally wanted her to marry and bring in a dowry, but Melisande had insisted on going to university. Now, not only had she failed to get into university, but she had also lost her purity to Claude, so her parents cut ties with her in anger. Claude refused to take responsibility, so Melisande threatened him with blackmail, forcing him to sign a marriage application. Their wedding day was a total disaster. Ku's mother tried to assert control over Melisande, but Melisande wasn't one to silently endure, and they argued loudly in front of everyone. However, none of this I saw firsthand. On their wedding day, my parents had sent me off to catch the train to university. When I arrived at the university I had dreamed of for 2 lifetimes, I cherished every moment there. I studied relentlessly, never missing any chance to improve myself. Later, with the wave of the economic reforms, I invested in industry and quickly made my first pot of gold. As my business grew larger, I bought a house in the city, hoping to bring my family over to live with me, but my grandmother refused to come to the city and insisted on staying in the countryside. So, I brought my parents to the city instead. When I returned to the village, it had already been 10 years, and I was there to handle my grandmother's funeral. It was during this trip that I heard about Claude's situation. Ku's mother, now frail, had left all the household chores to Melisande. Used to being spoiled, Melisande, after getting pregnant, refused to do any work and ordered Tom and Lily around instead. One day, while they were boiling water, the two of them didn't hold the kettle properly, and it spilled boiling water all over. Tom's hand was crushed, and Lily's face was badly burned. When Claude found out, he had a huge fight with Melisande, even hitting her. Melisande, already unable to tolerate her mother-in-law's sarcastic remarks, was so upset that she wrote a letter of complaint, which led to Claude being expelled and sent back to the village. Claude, who had always been arrogant, couldn't find a decent job and argued with Melisande all the time. In the end, Ku's mother passed away amid the couple's blame-shifting. Tom left without a word, and Lily, disfigured by the burns on her face, was forced to marry a butcher from a neighboring village whose wife had just died, severing ties with them entirely. Do you think it would have been better to just live honestly back then? A neighbor said to me with a sigh. I heard she was diagnosed with cancer recently. I smiled at the neighbor. Who knows? As I was about to leave after handling my grandmother's funeral, Claude suddenly appeared and blocked my way. His hair had turned gray, and he looked much older, but his eyes gleamed with excitement. Winter, Winter, you've been reborn, right? I was wrong in the past, but this time, let's start fresh. That Melisande, that vain woman, she can't compare to you in any way. A bodyguard stepped in to block Claude, and I pinched my nose in disgust. What kind of lunatic are you? Get away from me with that stench. Claude froze in place. That was the last thing he ever said to me in this life. For the past 40 years, every time he came near me, he always complained about the smell of a country person on me, disgusted by me. But that wasn't my scent, it was the foul stench of his own decaying heart. I ignored Claude's shouts. His return in this life was just what I needed. Before he died of illness, I would let him experience the end he deserved. The car started, and the forsythia flowers on the roadside were in full bloom. My spring had only just begun.